What happens when one of Hollywood's most recognizable actresses walks onto a popular daytime talk show expecting a friendly conversation, only for an unexpected exchange to slowly change the tone of the entire discussion? Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The audience applauds as Dakota Johnson walks onto the stage with a smile, greeting the panel before taking her seat. Everyone exchanges quick greetings, and the conversation begins with light-hearted questions about her latest project. Alyssa Farah Griffin smiles. Dakota, it's great to have you here. Congratulations on the new film. People are excited to see what you've been working on. Dakota nods. Thank you. It's been a busy year, but I'm happy it's finally coming out. Joy adds with a laugh. You've always picked interesting roles. You never seem to choose the obvious script. Dakota laughs. I guess I get bored easily. The audience chuckles. Whoopi smiles. That's not a bad thing. For the first several minutes, everything feels comfortable. They discuss filming, working with directors, and how Dakota balances work with her personal life. Sunny asks, do you ever read what people say about you online? Dakota smiles politely. Sometimes. Usually by accident. The audience laughs. I've learned that if you're looking for approval from strangers, you're probably looking in the wrong place. The audience applauds. Alyssa nods. I actually think that's healthy. Dakota says, it took years to get there. Sarah jumps in. Is it harder now because everything becomes a headline? Dakota answers, absolutely. Someone can make one comment during an hour-long interview, and suddenly that's all anyone remembers. Several members of the audience nod. The conversation remains relaxed. Then Alyssa shifts topics. You've been outspoken about how celebrities are expected to share opinions on social issues. Dakota nods carefully. I've said people shouldn't feel forced to become experts overnight. Alyssa leans forward. But don't you think public figures have some responsibility? Millions of people follow what you say. Dakota answers calmly. I think responsibility and obligation are different. A few audience members murmur. Alyssa continues. If someone has a huge platform, shouldn't they use it? Dakota smiles politely. If they actually know what they're talking about. A few laughs spread through the audience. Alyssa smiles. But doesn't silence sometimes send a message too? Dakota pauses. I don't think silence automatically means agreement. Sunny watches closely. Dakota continues. Sometimes silence means someone recognizes they don't know enough. Whoopi nods slightly. That's fair. Alyssa isn't finished. But there are moments when people expect leadership. Dakota replies. I understand that. She folds her hands. I just don't believe every actor suddenly becomes qualified because they're famous. The audience applauds. Joy smiles. That's probably true. Alyssa responds. But your opinions still influence people. Dakota nods. They might, but influence doesn't mean expertise. The audience grows quieter. Sarah notices the discussion becoming more serious. So where do you draw that line? Dakota answers. I speak when I've taken the time to understand something. And when I haven't, she shrugs. I'd rather admit that. Several audience members clap. Alyssa responds. Some people would say that's avoiding difficult conversations. Dakota keeps smiling, though the expression becomes more thoughtful. I don't think admitting limits is avoiding anything. Alyssa replies. But celebrities often benefit from public attention. Dakota nods. That's true. So should they also accept public expectations? Dakota takes a moment before answering. I accept criticism. I don't accept the idea that every microphone requires an opinion. The audience reacts with scattered applause. Sunny jumps in before Alyssa can continue. I actually think that's an interesting distinction. Joy agrees. Sometimes saying, I don't know is more honest. Alyssa smiles. I'm not criticizing honesty. I'm asking whether influence creates responsibility. Dakota nods. It creates opportunity. I don't think it creates obligation. The audience becomes noticeably quieter. Whoopi senses the shift. I think we're getting into one of those conversations where everyone can see it differently. Dakota smiles. That's okay. Alyssa nods politely. It is. But I still wonder if people with enormous audiences underestimate their impact. Dakota looks directly toward Alyssa. I don't underestimate it. I just don't think being visible automatically makes someone wise. The audience lets out an audible ooh. Joy glances toward Whoopi with a small smile. Whoopi laughs softly. Well, even Dakota smiles after hearing the audience react. Alyssa remains composed. So if a young fan asks where you stand on something important, Dakota answers, I'd rather encourage them to read multiple perspectives instead of copying mine. The audience applauds again. Sunny smiles. That's actually a thoughtful answer. Alyssa nods respectfully. I can appreciate that. But I still think many people wish celebrities would speak more often. Dakota replies gently. And many people wish celebrities would speak less. The audience bursts into laughter. Even Joy laughs. Whoopi smiles. She's got a point. Alyssa laughs too. I walked into that one. The tension eases for a moment, but the conversation has clearly shifted from a routine celebrity interview into a more serious exchange. Everyone around the table realizes the discussion is no longer just about a movie. The audience leans in, sensing that the next questions could take the conversation in an even more unexpected direction. The conversation resumes after the audience's laughter fades. The mood is lighter again, but everyone at the table knows they're now discussing something much bigger than a film promotion. Whoopi smiles. That's why these conversations are worth having. Dakota nods. I think so too. Sarah leans forward. Can I ask something? Do you ever worry that if you don't speak about an issue, people will decide what you believe anyway? Dakota thinks for a moment. That happens all the time. Sarah asks, does that bother you? Sometimes. Dakota smiles slightly. But I can't spend my life correcting every assumption people make. The audience applauds quietly. Joy adds, that sounds exhausting. Dakota laughs. It would be a full-time job. The audience laughs with her. Sunny joins in. Social media doesn't exactly encourage patience. Dakota nods. Everything moves so fast that people often expect immediate reactions. Sunny asks, do you think that's unrealistic? I do. Dakota answers calmly. Some conversations deserve more than 30 seconds of thought. Several audience members clap. Alyssa listens carefully before speaking again. I agree that thoughtful responses matter. She pauses. But there are moments when people feel silence can be disappointing. Dakota nods respectfully. I understand why. Alyssa continues. If someone admires you, they naturally wonder where you stand. Dakota answers. And I don't mind people wondering. She smiles. I just don't think I owe an instant answer every time the news changes. The audience reacts with another round of applause. Whoopi watches both women. It sounds like you're talking about timing more than whether someone should speak. Dakota nods. Exactly. If I speak, I want it to be because I've actually taken time to understand the issue. Joy smiles. That's becoming a rare quality. The audience laughs. Dakota chuckles. I don't know about that. Sunny asks, has there ever been a time when you changed your opinion after learning more? Dakota answers immediately. Many times. Sunny raises an eyebrow. And you're comfortable admitting that? I have to be. Dakota replies. If learning never changes your mind, then what was the point of learning? The audience applauds loudly. Even Alyssa smiles. I like that answer. Dakota thanks her with a nod. Sarah looks around the table. I think people sometimes mistake changing your opinion for weakness. Dakota agrees. I actually think it takes confidence. Joy nods. Or humility. Whoopi smiles. Probably both. The audience applauds once more. Alyssa shifts slightly in her chair. Let me ask something from another angle. Dakota gestures for her to continue. You've talked about avoiding speaking outside your expertise. Yes. What happens when an issue directly affects your industry? Dakota answers without hesitation. That's different. So you do feel comfortable speaking then? I do. She explains. If it's something I've experienced personally, I can speak honestly about my own experience. Sunny nods. That makes sense. Dakota continues. I just try not to confuse personal experience with universal truth. The audience grows noticeably quieter. Several people nod as they listen. Joy smiles. That's a sentence people should probably remember. Alyssa responds thoughtfully. So your concern isn't speaking. It's pretending certainty. Dakota smiles. Exactly. I think certainty is easy. Curiosity is harder. A quiet murmur spreads through the audience. Whoopi leans back. That's an interesting way to put it. Sarah asks, have you always thought this way? Dakota laughs. Not even close. What changed? She smiles. Making mistakes. The audience laughs softly. I've said things in interviews that sounded better in my head than they did out loud. Joy laughs. I think everyone at this table has. Everyone smiles. Even the audience laughs. Dakota continues. Those moments remind you that words stick around. Sunny asks, do they make you more careful? They make me slower. Dakota answers, I'd rather pause than regret saying something I didn't fully mean. The audience applauds again. Alyssa folds her hands. I don't think anyone here disagrees with being thoughtful. She smiles warmly. I guess my concern is that influence carries weight whether someone wants it or not. Dakota nods. I agree. Alyssa looks surprised. You do? I do. Dakota continues. I just think the best way to use influence isn't always by giving answers. Sarah asks, so what is it? Dakota smiles. Sometimes it's asking better questions. The audience responds with another wave of applause. Whoopi points toward Dakota. Now that's something. Joy laughs. She's making our jobs harder. Everyone around the table laughs. The atmosphere relaxes again, though the discussion remains thoughtful. Sunny looks toward Alyssa. I actually think both points can exist together. Alyssa nods. I think so too. I still believe public figures have opportunities to help people. Dakota responds gently. And I hope they do. She pauses. I just hope they don't feel pressured to pretend they know everything. The audience claps once again. Sarah smiles. I think that's a message that applies to everyone, not just celebrities. Dakota nods. I'd agree with that. Whoopi glances toward the audience. I have a feeling people at home are already debating this conversation. The audience laughs knowingly. Joy adds, they've probably started before we finish the segment. More laughter follows. Alyssa smiles at Dakota. I appreciate you answering every question. Dakota returns the smile. I appreciate thoughtful questions. The audience applauds warmly. The exchange has become noticeably more respectful than confrontational. Instead of trying to win the discussion, both women seem focused on explaining their perspectives. Even so, viewers can sense there are still important differences between them, and the audience remains fully engaged as the conversation prepares to move into an even more personal direction. The applause settles, and the conversation moves into a quieter rhythm. The atmosphere around the table has changed. What began as a routine interview has become one of those discussions where everyone is listening carefully, weighing every word. Whoopi smiles. I think we've landed somewhere interesting. Dakota nods. So do I. Joy glances toward Dakota. You mentioned making mistakes earlier. Dakota laughs softly. I've made plenty. Joy continues. Do those moments ever make you hesitate before doing interviews? Dakota thinks for a second. Not really. She smiles. They just remind me that conversations are unpredictable. The audience laughs. Sarah nods. Especially live television. Everyone around the table laughs again. Dakota adds, you can prepare for questions, but you can't prepare for every perspective. Sunny smiles. And that's probably what makes these conversations worthwhile. Dakota agrees. I think disagreement can be healthy. Alyssa looks toward her. As long as people stay respectful. Dakota nods immediately. Exactly. The audience applauds. Whoopi gestures toward both women. I think you've both done that today. More applause follows. Sunny asks another question. Has anyone ever completely changed your mind during a conversation? Dakota smiles. Yes. Sunny looks surprised. Really? Absolutely. Dakota answers. I've walked into discussions feeling certain about something and left realizing I hadn't considered another point of view. The audience becomes noticeably quieter. Sarah asks, was that difficult? It was humbling. Dakota replies, but I'd rather be humbled than stay wrong. A wave of applause spreads across the studio. Joy smiles. That's not something people say often. Dakota laughs. Maybe we should. Alyssa leans forward once more. I think part of why people expect celebrities to speak is because visibility naturally creates trust. Dakota listens carefully. I understand that. Alyssa continues. But sometimes people aren't looking for expertise. They're looking for reassurance. Dakota nods thoughtfully. I've thought about that. She pauses. And I think reassurance is important. But honesty matters too. Sunny asks, what do you mean? Dakota replies, if I don't understand something well enough, pretending certainty isn't reassuring. It's misleading. The audience applauds again. Whoopi nods. I can respect that. Joy adds, people forget that saying I need to learn more can also be leadership. Dakota smiles. I think so. Sarah turns toward Alyssa. Do you think there's room for both ideas? Alyssa smiles. I actually do. She glances at Dakota. I still believe public figures can encourage meaningful conversations. Dakota responds warmly. I agree. Alyssa continues. And I also understand your point that people shouldn't feel pressured to become instant experts. Dakota nods. I appreciate that. The audience applauds as the tension continues to soften. Whoopi laughs. I think we've solved absolutely nothing. The audience bursts into laughter. Joy points across the table. That's television. More laughter fills the studio. Dakota smiles. I actually think we solved something. Everyone looks toward her. She continues. We proved people can disagree without turning each other into enemies. The audience responds with one of the loudest rounds of applause of the afternoon. Sunny smiles broadly. I wish more conversations looked like this. Sarah nods. So do I. Alyssa smiles at Dakota. I appreciate that you never took my questions personally. Dakota smiles back. I didn't. You were asking sincere questions. And I tried to give sincere answers. The audience applauds once again. Whoopi glances toward the audience before speaking. You know, this reminds me that viewers don't always expect us to agree. They expect us to listen. A quiet applause spreads through the studio. Joy nods. That's probably the hardest part. Dakota laughs. It definitely is. One audience member stands to applaud, followed by several others. The panel smiles as the applause continues. Whoopi waits for the room to settle. Before we let you go, what do you hope people take away from your new film? Dakota's expression softens. I hope people leave asking questions. She smiles. Not because the movie gives every answer, but because good stories remind us to stay curious. The audience applauds warmly. Sunny nods. That actually connects perfectly to everything we've been talking about. Dakota laughs. I guess it does. Alyssa smiles. I'll admit, this conversation went in a completely different direction than I expected. Dakota grins. Mine too. Everyone laughs. The atmosphere has become noticeably lighter than it was earlier. The discussion has evolved from a debate into a genuine exchange of ideas, with each person acknowledging the other's perspective without abandoning their own. As the show prepares for its final segment, the audience senses that the conversation has left a lasting impression, not because anyone won, but because everyone remained willing to listen. The conversation winds down as the audience continues applauding. The producers signal that the segment is coming to an end, but there is a noticeable feeling in the studio that something meaningful has happened. Instead of a typical celebrity interview focused only on a new movie, the discussion has become one of the most thoughtful exchanges of the morning. Whoopi smiles at Dakota. Thank you for being willing to have a real conversation. Dakota smiles back. Thank you for asking real questions. The audience applauds warmly. Joy laughs. I think everyone expected us to spend the whole segment talking about your film. Dakota grins. We got there, eventually. The audience laughs. Sunny nods. Sometimes the unexpected conversations are the memorable ones. Dakota agrees. I usually learn the most from those. Alyssa turns toward Dakota one last time. I appreciate that we could disagree on a few things without making it personal. Dakota smiles. I appreciated that too. She continues. I think respectful disagreement is becoming more valuable. The audience responds with another round of applause. Sarah smiles. I hope people watching at home remember that part. Whoopi nods. I couldn't agree more. The show's closing music begins softly in the background. Whoopi thanks Dakota for joining the panel, and the audience rises to its feet with a warm standing ovation as Dakota waves and exits the stage. As the cameras stop rolling, several members of the audience continue talking among themselves. Some discuss Dakota's comments about admitting when you don't know enough, while others debate Alyssa's point that public influence comes with responsibility. Even off the air, the conversation continues in the studio lobby as guests leave. Later that afternoon, clips from the fictional interview begin circulating across social media. One short moment gains particular attention, Dakota saying, I'd rather encourage people to read multiple perspectives instead of copying mine. Another widely shared clip features her saying, influence doesn't automatically create expertise. Viewers react in different ways. Some praise Dakota for encouraging curiosity over certainty. Others say Alyssa asked important questions about the responsibilities that come with a large public platform. Many comments point out that the discussion stayed respectful despite genuine disagreement. One viewer writes, this is how conversations should happen. Another comments, nobody shouted. Nobody interrupted. They simply explained their views. A third adds, "I didn't agree with every point either of them made, but I appreciated hearing both sides." Entertainment commentators also discussed the interview, noting that what started as a routine promotional appearance turned into one of the show's most memorable conversations. Rather than focusing on dramatic confrontations, much of the attention centers on the calm exchange of ideas and the willingness of both women to listen before responding. In the days that follow, viewers continue sharing clips and debating the discussion online. Some say Dakota's comments about humility resonated most. Others feel Alyssa's questions reflected what many viewers were already wondering. While opinions remain divided, there is broad agreement that the conversation demonstrated how people can disagree without turning the discussion into a personal conflict. The episode becomes remembered not for a shocking argument, but for something much rarer, a thoughtful exchange where no one tried to dominate the conversation. Each participant left with the same views they began with, but with a greater understanding of why someone else might see the issue differently. And that's what made this fictional talk show moment stand out. If you enjoyed this talk show story, share your opinion in the comments. Whose perspective did you agree with the most, and why? Don't forget to subscribe to the Star Talks, like this video, and turn on notifications for more talk show-inspired stories and conversations.